Oh, hello there. Oh, it is a late Friday night / early Saturday morning, however you want to look at it. And I am here reviewing Season 1, because I'm assuming there's going to be a Season 2, of the Disney Plus Marvel show What If. What If is an interesting show because it obviously spun out of the events of Loki. I have a video review of Loki if you want to go look at that. If not, whatever. I'm assuming you watched it. If not, I don't know. Why are you watching this? Where there's like a multiverse now in the Marvel Universe, in the MCU. So, What If is basically looking at some of these universes and asking, and seeing the changes in the universe, like, what if this happened instead of this? And that was the concept. Now, What If actually used to be a comic book. It was a comic book that I think ran from either the late 60s or early 70s, well through the 90s, maybe even into the early 2000s. And then it stopped as a regular comic book series. That's a long time now. But it stopped as a regular comic book series. And then it just sort of became... Nowadays, it's not really done that much anymore, but every now and then they'll pop up with a What If as sort of like an annual. But it doesn't happen a lot. Usually revolving around a major storyline. What if this happened in a major storyline instead of this? But they don't even do that much anymore. There was one point where they were doing what ifs that were just like DC's Elseworlds, which are similar but different. I'm getting lost. It's not important. I actually remember my first What If comic. It's funny that watching the show made me think of it. The first What If comic I ever got was, I think, I forgot what number it was, but it was a what if what if Cable killed the X-Men, I think it was called. I remember liking it a lot. They were always fun, If you ever seen any of my weekend reading things, you know that I've mentioned numerous times that I like alternate reality storylines because you can take familiar characters and storylines and sort of play with them more. You can have fun with them by changing them because it doesn't matter. And What If is a comic book that really allowed people to do that. And similarly with the show, it allowed them to do that. But unlike the comic book, which took What If for different comic book stories, What If the show takes What If for different stories in it's mainly done it with the movies, but I suppose it could with the TV shows considering they're supposed to be part of the same thing. But it's mainly done it with the movies. There were 9 episodes. 9. And it sort of ran like an anthology series, but near the end, the stories started to become more connected, and pretty much every episode gets referenced by at least the last episode, but we'll get to that. So let's break down what each of the episodes were, and then I'll tell you, and then I'll go over what I think about the entire series. I got them written down here, so I didn't forget. Episode 1 was, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? That one's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically it took a what if from the movie Captain America, the First Avenger, where instead of the Hydra spy attacking after Steve Rogers became Captain America, he attacked before, and it injured Steve. So Peggy Carter had to be injected with the super soldier serum instead, and she became known as Captain Carter, and she even had a vibranium shield, and instead of having the the star to represent the American flag. She had the Union Jack, and her suit had the Union Jack on it. And she fights Hydra, and things go a little differently. Steve Rogers, Howard Stark, even builds an Iron Man type suit that Steve Rogers uses, and the Red Skull was using the Tesseract to open a portal that summons this weird demon thing, and Peggy fights it, and she gets sucked in, and then it opens up later, and that's how she ends up going from the 40s into the modern age. So that's how and that's basically where the episode left off. Episode 2 was What If T'Challa Became a Star-Lord? This one is a little bit different because it takes a what if from Guardians of the Galaxy and a what if from Black Panther by sort of mixing the two together. It sort of does a what if instead of picking up Peter Quill, the Ravagers took T'Challa. And now T'Challa's, one of the leaders of the Ravagers. He's known as Star-Lord, but unlike Peter Quill, he's far better at it. He's way more successful. He's better known. He's still a thief, but he's more of a Robin Hood-like thief, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. He's solved actual problems, created peace. He even convinced Thanos to give up his murderous ways. He's done very well. And it basically that story all revolves around a plot of him robbing the Collector. I never liked what they did with the Elders of the Universe in the movies. They made a lot of their cosmic characters way less powerful than they are in the comic books, like the Elders of the Universe, who are supposed to be way more, like the Collector and the Game Master, are supposed to be way more powerful, and Thanos, who's supposed to be way more powerful. They powered him down and made him weak, and I don't like that because I feel like it makes it more boring, but that's a whole other issue. That doesn't have anything to do with the show. That's not the show's fault. And in the end, T'Challa ends up going back. He finds out that, Wakanda is still around. He ends up going back home to Wakanda, and we find out that Peter Quill is just some guy working at a Dairy Queen and gets visited by Ego, his father, and we know how that's going to turn out. Episode 3 was pretty good. What if the world lost its mightiest heroes? That basically follows all the Avengers movies, but starts off really from a scene in Iron Man 2 where Nick Fury and Tony Stark meet, and they inject Tony Stark with something, but instead of it helping him like it does in the movie and the show, he just sort of dies right there, and then the Black Widow gets blamed for killing him. So she gets arrested, but then breaks out of containment to try to figure out who set her up. And then Hawkeye supposedly kills Thor while he's still mortal. And then when Hawkeye's being held in a cell, he just dies. And the Incredible Hulk gets shot, and somehow it explodes him and kills him. What else? And then Black Widow gets beaten to death. And it stars Nick Fury because he's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And after Thor dies, Loki shows up with the armies of Asgard and basically threatens the Earth because he's now technically in charge. And so Fury's on kind of a clock to figure out what happened, and he realizes that the whole time that it was actually Hank Pym. In this world, what went different is Janet and Hank's daughter, Hope, became a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who died on a mission, and Hank Pym, who already had a grudge against S.H.I.E.L.D., blamed Nick Fury and decided to get revenge by killing off his prize project, the Avengers. And then when he goes to face Fury, he gets his ass kicked because he's actually facing Loki in disguise. So Loki and Fury teamed up to beat him. And then after that, it seems like, everything's good, but then Loki decides, well, he's going to conquer the Earth now because he's got nobody standing in his way. But Nick Fury has a plan, because the one Avenger he didn't get is Captain America, and then he also calls Captain Marvel. So at least he's got two superheroes to help him. Episode 4 was What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands? This might be my favorite episode of the whole season. I'll get into more about the structure of all the episodes and problems that I had with them, and why this one I felt was better. But this one might be the best one story-wise, because it was the most emotionally... It was probably the most emotional one, and it told the best story in my opinion. And it's funny because it's about Doctor Strange, who might be one of the worst movies. Honestly, I felt like of all the Marvel movies, probably Captain Marvel was my least favorite. Not being the misogynistic asshole. I got nothing wrong with the character. I just didn't like the way the story was told. I didn't like the whole... I just didn't like the way the movie was done. That's it. I got no problem with the character or the actress or any of that. But yeah, this one is interesting, because this is where the title is kind of metaphorical. If you know the story of Doctor Strange, he was an arrogant doctor who was in a bad car accident. He was an arrogant surgeon who was really good, and he was in a bad accident that fucking severely damaged his hands and almost completely crippled them. So he had to learn how to do basic things with his hands again. And surgeons got to have very precise hands. There can be no shaking, no nothing. So his days as a surgeon were over. And so he ends up turning to the mystic arts to try to solve his problems, and ends up becoming, the Sorcerer Supreme. In this story, what was different is he was already with his love interest, Rachel. They were already a couple, and so on the night he's driving, they crash, and instead of him losing his hands, she dies, hence losing his heart, the woman he loves. And he goes through the same process of grieving, becomes the Sorcerer Supreme, all of that, but he has the Eye of Agamotto, which has the Time Stone in it. And he's thinking one night, he thinks to himself, like, what if I use it? And so he decides to do that. So he keeps going back in time, trying to do things differently to save her. And he does several different things, thinking, what if he didn't do this on the drive? What if he lets her drive? What if he takes a different route? What if he just doesn't pick her up at all, so she's never in the car, but each time she still dies? So after one of the events, the Ancient One, while he's still back in time, comes to see him, and basically explains, like, you can't change this. This is a pivotal moment. It's a moment that's too important. It has to happen, because he has to become the Sorcerer Supreme, and this is the only way he'll do it. So this has to happen. She has to die, as unfortunate as it is. And he won't accept that, so he and the Ancient One fight, and the Ancient One does cast some sort of spell on him, and he teleports away. He teleports to some ancient temple where he figures out that he needs more power to really just change time completely. If he wants to alter the very structure of time, he's going to need more power. So he starts summoning weird, like, demonic and otherworldly creatures, and then killing them and absorbing their power. So he slowly just starts taking on more and more power of these demonic beings, and basically becomes like this weird dark god. But he realizes something is wrong. See, what the Ancient One did to him is she split his timeline in two. So now he's not the only Doctor Strange in his universe. There's a Doctor Strange that made the decision to never start going back in time to save Rachel. So there's Doctor Strange who made the right decision, and then there's him who made the wrong decision. And the one who made the right decision is realizing that something's wrong, and time and space are being erased around him. And the ghost of the Ancient One visits him and explains why. So he then decides to use the Eye of Agamotto to go back to the place where Rachel died. He meets his dark counterpart. They fight, and they have a pretty cool sorcerer's battle. But he loses, gets absorbed into the evil Doctor Strange, who now has the full power he needs to cast a spell to change time, which he does. He alters time, saves Rachel. The problem is that leads to the destruction of their universe, and Rachel gets erased anyways. And his universe starts collapsing on itself. He tries to stop it. He's aware of the Watcher who's watching him. The Watcher watches everything and narrates every episode. And he asks the Watcher for help to save his universe, and the Watcher tells him no, he doesn't interfere. And he's like, you were warned about what would happen, and you did it anyways. He's like, I won't help you. So now Strange is just trapped in this, what remains of his universe, which is just a tiny pocket universe of nothing, which is just him alone wallowing in his misery. And that's it. That's how the episode ends. It's really kind of sad, and it's just, but it was the best story in my opinion, which is probably why I went into it the most. Episode 5 is What If Zombies, which plays off the whole Marvel Zombies miniseries craze that was a thing a couple years back. Actually, probably decades back now. Where there's just a zombie plague in the Marvel Universe. They explained it in the episode that it was from Ant-Man 2, where where Hank Pym goes to save his wife who's in the quantum realm. But in this version of the story, in the quantum realm, she caught a weird virus that turned her into a zombie, and then she turned him into a zombie, and they both came back, and they just started spreading the zombie virus. But the story starts at the beginning of where Infinity War started, where the Hulk returns to Earth, and now he's got to go with the remainder of humanity that's acting as a resistance. It's like Spider-Man, Aoki, the Winter Soldier, one of Ant-Man's friends who's I can't remember, Happy Hogan. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. Oh yeah, the Wasp. And they go to a place where they think there's a cure. It's the Vision, who's figured out he can cure the zombie effects of the Mind Stone. He's managed to cure Scott Lang, who's just a head now in a jar, but somehow still alive. Oh yeah, and Doctor Strange's cloak of levitation is still around too. And but they find out that he's also been the Vision's also been keeping Wanda, who's a zombie, and he's been feeding her, and they find T'Challa's still alive there, but he's been feeding pieces of T'Challa to Wanda. It's actually pretty dark. And they end up getting away with the remains of the Vision pulls out the Mind Stone thinking he needs to die to punish himself for what he's done, and T'Challa takes it, and they decide to head back to what remains of them. Quite a few of them die, and they decide to head back to Wakanda to somehow use the Mind Stone to create a cure for the world. Unfortunately, a zombified Thanos is there with the rest of the Infinity Stones, so they might just be making a bigger problem. Episode 6 was What If Killmonger Rescued Tony Stark? This wasn't a bad episode either. It's exactly what it says. It starts out at the beginning of Iron Man, but when he gets attacked in the event that should damage his heart and lead to him becoming Iron Man, Killmonger saves him. The enemy from Black Panther steps in and saves him, because he's still working for the United States military. Tony Stark is so grateful, he makes Killmonger his head of security. Killmonger then exposed the Obadiah Stane. The reason he was there is because he found out the Ten Rings were going to try to kill Tony Stark on the behest of Obadiah Stane. So after he does that, Stark makes Killmonger the COO of Stark Enterprises. And then they decide to work together to create these sort of military drones, and during which they decide they need a power source. Killmonger convinces Stark to use vibranium. So they send Rhodey to try to get some vibranium off the black market from Ulysses Klaue. While there, Black Panther shows up, takes out Klaue's men, and gets into a slight conflict with Rhodey, but doesn't get too bad. But Killmonger shows up with a weapon, kills both Black Panther and Rhodey, and makes it look like it's basically, he uses that as a way to start a war between the United States and Wakanda. Stark knows what's going on, though. He realizes he got duped by this kid, who then kills him too. And only Pepper realizes something is wrong. So a war is now breaking out, and they have these weapons created by Stark Enterprises. These new drones created by Stark Enterprises, powered by vibranium. Killmonger kills Klaue. Well, Klaue shows him where Wakanda is, so he kills Klaue, sneaks into Wakanda, and presents the body of Klaue as a way to sort of make a peace offering. He then presents himself before his uncle, the king, who, accepts him in, but sure, he's unsure of him. She doesn't trust him. Anyways, when the U.S. military's drones, created by Stark Enterprises, start to invade Wakanda, Killmonger says, just let them in. He says they're run on a network, so if you open your shields, and then when they come in you drop your shields, it'll cut off the network, they'll just all go dead. And that's what happens, but he also has a way to just restart them. So after they break down at first, he restarts them and says, oh, Stark must have found a way around it to re-jump them. He's like, I didn't realize he did that. But then he fights alongside the Wakandan army to destroy the drones, so he ends up looking like a hero. So his uncle decides to make him the next Black Panther, therefore the next official heir to the throne. Shuri doesn't trust it, and she knows something's wrong, so she gives that evidence to Pepper and just says, we need to figure out a way to stop this guy. So that's the end of that. But I have to admit that Killmonger's plan in this episode was way smarter than his plan in Black Panther. It was way more clever. It was way more devious, getting the United States and Wakanda to play against each other, using his two enemies to fight each other, to weaken both and give him what he wanted, was way smarter than his plan in Black Panther. So I actually did like it, because it was a way more clever story. Episode 7. This one's more of a silly one, like Episode 2 was. What if Thor were an only child? This is a world where Odin never kidnapped, really, Loki. He gave him back to his father, so Thor was raised alone. And because of that, Thor is basically the universe's most powerful frat boy. Just a party animal who, when his father takes the Odin sleep and his mother goes away for a while, Thor and his friends decide to go to random planets and throw a world-spanning party. And this time they come to Earth. So he lands in Vegas, and they decide to just start throwing a party. They invite aliens from other planets and shit. Jane Foster was the only one who knew it was coming, but she thought it was an invasion. But then when she meets Thor, she obviously falls for him. S.H.I.E.L.D. is not too impressed that Thor is here. They don't like he's here, because the last planet Thor was on, the planet itself was destroyed. Though it's not quite clear whether his partying destroyed the planet, or if that was just going to happen anyways. But, this party starts just lasting days into weeks, and they're just destroying things and wrecking things and just getting drunk and just going wherever they want. Fury got injured in the party early on, so Maria Hill is the acting director of S.H.I.E.L.D. She invites Captain Marvel to come by and stop Thor. She and Thor fight. good looking fight, but it's kind of stupid in the long run. The whole thing about this episode is that it's like it kind of demonstrates what kind of asshole Shield is as a group, and kind of what an asshole fucking Captain Marvel is. She's just a total fucking buzzkill narc. It's like she just starts punching him in the face for no reason. It's like you're like, that's not a good hero. You start beating on a guy. That's like. I mean, I know he's Thor, he's a god, he can take, but still, it's like, that's just like some aggressive, violent cop shit, you fucking dumb bitch. It's like, that's not cool. You just start hitting a guy because you don't like him? And because you can? I'm just saying, if that were a cop, we'd be asking for that cop, we'd be demanding that cop's badge, and we'd asking for them to be arrested. Why should this superhero somehow be above that shit? But whatever. And then in the end, you know, Jane manages to get a hold of Thor's mother, Freya, or Frigga, I forget what her name is in the movies. And she's coming to Earth, so Thor convinces everybody to start cleaning everything up, and everything seems cool. Except at the end, when all of a sudden a portal opens up, and an army of Ultron-like robots come out, including this version of Ultron that has the Infinity Stones adorned about his body. So you're like, okay, what the fuck is that? Well, that leads into the next episode. What if Ultron won? This is a universe where in the Age of Ultron movie, Ultron, they never got a hold of the vision body that Ultron was creating for himself, so Ultron was able to download his body into the vision. And he then never got challenged by the Jarvis AI and managed to set off a bunch of nukes that destroyed the planet, killing everybody. Except the only two people who weren't on the ground at the time, and that was Hawkeye and Black Widow. So they're the only two humans left on Earth resisting against Ultron's army. Ultron has an army because he already had the Mind Stone, and then all of a sudden Thanos shows up with the rest of the Infinity Stones, but he manages to easily kill Thanos, which will some people go, it's just like, well, he didn't do that in the movies. It's like, yeah, but then you realize Vision and Thanos barely had any interaction in the movies, and by the time they did, Vision was already like really weak, and basically he had already died, and Thanos just brought him back just so he could quickly kill him again. So he really got the drop on him in the movie, so I don't think it was really a real matchup. This time we did, and we saw just how powerful Vision is. He then takes the rest of the Infinity Stones and makes himself instantly a god. He creates a suit of armor that makes him Ultron looking like armor, and then out of thin air just creates a robot army. That's what, you know, Hawkeye and Natasha have been fighting. Then Ultron starts spanning the universe, fighting everyone and anyone, destroying life everywhere, killing, you know, the Nova Corps, Ego, Captain Marvel, just going to all the familiar planets and killing everybody. He gets so powerful that he takes notice of the Watcher, and the Watcher realizes he takes notice of him, and it kind of freaks him out. The Watcher then turns his attention back to Hawkeye and Black Widow, because he realizes they're searching for something, and I think like an old Russian government base, and he realizes they're on the verge of coming up with something that could defeat Ultron, but he thinks like if he can speed it up if he interferes, so he questions maybe I should start interfering, but he doesn't. And they find it. They find the location of the Arnim Zola AI. So they go to get the Arnim Zola AI. They download it in one of Clint's arrows. They fight a bunch of the robots, and they manage to download the AI into one of Ultron's robots, hoping they can connect it directly to his network so he can fight. so the two AIs can fight each other, basically turning Arnim Zola into a computer virus specifically for Ultron. At this point, Ultron has now found where the Watcher is in that weird in-between universes place, and he confronts the Watcher. They fight, and we get to see the Watcher actually do shit, and just how powerful he is, which is pretty powerful. They fight, and their fight like traverses through the multiverse itself until, you know, the Watcher gets beat and has to retreat from the fight. That throws a kink into Black Widow and Hawkeye's plans, because their plan only works if Ultron is still in their universe, which he's not. So they have to run from Ultron's army, and Clint sacrifices himself so Arnim Zola and Black Widow can get away. That episode ends where we start going back to things, because the Watcher doesn't know what to do in this situation, so he needs help. So he goes all the way back to episode 4 to where that evil Doctor Strange was in the remains of his now destroyed universe. And basically he says to him, I need your help. And that's how that episode ends. Episode 9 is, what if the Watcher broke his oath? This is where the Watcher assembles the rest of his team. It turns out the Doctor Strange was just the first recruit, and he starts assembling team members from throughout the multiverse. And surprise, surprise, it's basically all the characters we saw in the rest of the episodes. He gets Captain Carter from episode 1, gets Star-Lord T'Challa from episode 2. Nobody from episode 3, but that will come up. Of course, we saw that he got Doctor Strange from episode 4. Episode 5, nobody there, but that does come up. He gets Killmonger from episode 6. You might be wondering why. That seems like a bad decision, but I've actually thought about it, and I'll explain why I think that wasn't such a bad idea. He gets Thor from episode 7, which makes sense because he was already confronting Ultron's army. And from episode 8, well, we'll get to that. They gather in this little place created by Doctor Strange that looks like a bar Peggy used to hang out in, and they come up with a plan. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. They also, someone who wasn't from any of the episodes, they get a Gamora from a world where she was working with, I don't know if she's working with the rest of the Avengers or just Tony Stark, but a world where they had defeated Thanos and had destroyed the Infinity Stones. They actually had built a device to destroy them. So they needed her for that. So the Watcher calls this group of his the Guardians of the Multiverse, and then they come up with a plan to sort of destroy the Infinity Stones. They just needed to get their hands on one stone so it could power the device, because the device needs to be powerful enough to destroy the Infinity Stones, so it actually needs to be powered by one. So they had a plan to steal the Soul Stone. So basically, before the fight even starts, they go to some world that has no intelligent life, and they wait there to gain Ultron's attention. They then send Gamora and Killmonger to another reality to wait for them. So the rest then fight Ultron in a big battle, but they manage to get the Soul Stone off of his chest, and they then head to this other reality where Gamora and Killmonger are. There they're about to destroy the Soul Stone, but as they are about to do it, Black Widow shows up and takes the Soul Stone. Turns out they're from Ultron's original universe, so that's where the Black Widow is. They manage to convince her to join them, but by the time they do, Ultron shows up, and they have to fight him, and they have to stop him from getting the Soul Stone back. They fight pretty valiantly, but he's too powerful for them, and he eventually gets the Soul Stone back. Almost destroys the entire galaxy they're in, but Strange is powerful enough that remember, Strange is a godlike being himself, so he's powerful enough to stop it. That's when Black Widow comes up with her original plan to infect Ultron with the Arnim Zola AI, which she does with the arrow. She shoots the arrow right through his eye, and he then internally fights Arnim Zola, and it causes him to basically just shut down. Now, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, yeah, but you know how when he's destroyed, Arnim Zola will be in possession of his body and the Infinity Stones. Like, that's a problem that they don't seem to be paying attention to. But see, remember how I said bringing Killmonger in was probably a bad idea? See, they had a head of one of the Ultron drone robots, and Killmonger had it, and he was doing stuff with it. He had enough knowledge to like sort of reprogram it that he could use it to then take control of Ultron's armor, which he then starts teleporting to him along with the stones. And he tries to convince the others that they could do so much with the power of the Infinity Stones. And he tries to convince them that they could change things for the better, and they don't take it. And T'Challa tries to tell him to like give up the stones, and Killmonger's like, well, he's like, I wanted you to join me, but if you don't, well, I'm sorry, I have to do this. And he's about to attack them, but then you see that Arnim Zola has in fact taken control of the Ultron Vision body. He even has the Arnim Zola AI in the stomach as a reference to what his character looks like in the comic books. And they sort of battle for control of the Soul Stones, of the Infinity Stones. They start pushing and pulling them away from each other, and it creates a sort of like conflict, tug of war between the two of them. And the rest of the heroes don't know what to do because they can't seem to get in between it because there's just too much power going around. And that's when Strange realizes they don't need to beat one of them. They were never supposed to win this battle. It was just supposed to come to this. He then uses his powers to basically trap the two in a pocket universe where they'll always be in conflict over the stones, but the stones in them will be contained. And that's how he wins that. That was the plan all along. Apparently, the Watcher knew how all of this would play out, and that's why he needed all the characters. That's why he needed Killmonger. Because he knew that it would take Arnim Zola to defeat Ultron, but leaving Arnim Zola with control of the Soul Stones would also be a problem. So he needed somebody like Killmonger who would be duplicitous in his own way, try to take the stones, so he and Zola would be fighting over them, so that would leave them in a weak position that Strange could take advantage of. You see? It's actually kind of brilliant. The Watcher then sends all the characters back to their own universes. Even Peggy, who would like to go back to her own time to be with Steve again, but he tells her that, her time and reality she's in now needs her more. As for Black Widow, she says she won't go back to her universe because there's literally nothing left for her. Oh yeah, and remember how I said they reference all the episodes during the fight with Ultron? Doctor Strange actually opens a portal and brings in all the zombies from the zombie universe and just dumps them on Ultron to distract him. So that's how they reference that episode. But the one episode they hadn't referenced yet was episode 3. Because they had Black Widow who had nowhere to go, basically the Watcher brings her to the universe from episode 3 where most of the Avengers were killed. And S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain America, and Captain Marvel are fighting Loki and the Asgardians. He brings Black Widow there and basically says, well, if you want to be a Black Widow, here's a universe where you can be, because this universe of Black Widow is gone, so you can take her place. And so she does. And she helps them defeat Loki. Pretty handily, too. As for what happens to the rest, they basically go back to their normal lives. Doctor Strange gets possession of the pocket universe, which has now been shrunken down to like this little like orb, and he goes back to his dead universe, where it's now his job to just watch and be the guardian of this pocket universe that contains, Killmonger, Arnim Zola, and 6 Infinity Stones that they're in a constant, eternal struggle for. So he has a pretty important job, and he's willing to take it on, because he's learned the hard way about being reckless with that kind of power. And then the Watcher returns to his job as just that, the Watcher. There's even a little moment where he has an argument with Natasha, who's just saying, like, you just watch us as your stories, and he explains, he's like, no, he's like, your stories are the most important things in the world to me. He comes off, it's really kind of a commentary on being like an obsessive comic book geek. It's kind of funny. And then there's actually an after credits scene where it shows Peggy back in her universe, because she was in an event that was like at the beginning of that was similar to the beginning of Captain America 2, where they were on the boat and she's fighting Backtrock and everything. But in this universe on the boat, what they find was on there was they find the Hydra Stomper, the Iron Man suit from the 40s, and apparently somebody's alive in it. I guess the Hydra had Steve this whole time, so there might be something to that. As whether we'll see it in the next season or not, I don't know. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully they just go on to a whole new batch of stories. I hope that's what they do. But it was pretty good. It wrapped up fairly nicely. Now here's some of the critiques I have with the overall thing. All the stories were fine. They took them all from all the movies. Even the ones that were kind of silly were fine. There were plenty of silly movies. There's a lot of silliness in the Marvel movies, especially lately, so I'm cool with it. And they all worked. Here's 2 problems I had. Problem number 1, the animation. The animation is actually not that bad for TV animation. I've definitely seen worse. I'm looking at you, Invincible. But this is Disney we're talking about. Disney is the pioneer of fucking animation. It should look better than this. I've made a comment when somebody was complaining about how shitty the animation is, and I said, it is the best shitty animation I've ever seen. Which is true. There's a lot of shitty animation on television, and this is the best quality shitty animation. But it's like they pick and choose when it's good. The art style is fine. I have no problem with the art style. I actually kind of liked it. But the animation itself, it's not like I said, it's not the worst. It's not terrible. But for who's making it, it should be way better. As for the stories themselves, like I said, the stories were all fine. They were all different and unique in their own ways. Episode 4 and Episode 8 were definitely my favorites, with Episodes 4 being my ultimate favorite, just because it was the best told story. My problem with most of the stories overall, but 4, in my opinion, seemed to be immune to this the most, was the pacing. Because they're all like half-an-hour episodes, but they're not really telling half-an-hour stories. So it seems like they're rushing through everything. Everything feels rushed, like it's happening very, very, very quick. Now, normally I hate when things get dragged out too much, and I do. But I also hate when things feel rushed, because it doesn't feel like you're telling the story well. Even the way they were talking felt rushed. It felt like everybody was talking like really quick like this, like all the time. Every line had to be doing very quickly, quick like this. It's like, Jesus Christ, were you guys getting paid by? It's like, is everybody being paid by the fucking second? They wanted to keep this under cost. Like, what the hell is going on here? It's like everything just felt super rushed. Except for Episode 4. Episode 4 felt like it was paced very well. Episode 8 felt paced good too, but there were parts where it felt rushed. But it felt like they were rushing everything. So it just might be because they're not used to telling half-an-hour stories. Even with their other TV series, most of the episodes were like, 45 minutes to an hour long. But, yeah. So I would say the pacing and the animation were my two biggest problems with this series. But other than that, I liked it. It was a fun show, and it told interesting stories. And I hope to see more. I think they said they are planning on doing a season 2. I hope to see more. I hope to see them expand on some of the other stories in the Marvel universe, expand on other characters, see what other kind of stories they can tell. It should be fun. And by then, they're probably working on it now, but maybe we'll have other movies they can work with, like some of the more recent ones or something like that. Could be interesting. But yeah, I would say, What If season 1? I'd give it a thumb up. I had a few problems, so I'm not going to give it 2 thumbs up, but definitely 1 solid thumb up. And I think it has potential. So, I also like Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher. That's a good choice for the voice of the Watcher. That's definitely a good choice for that. So, yeah. That felt like they threw a lot of money at the voice actors. They didn't get everybody from the movies to do the voices of their characters, but they did get a lot of people from the movies to do the voice of their characters. It's even the last work of Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P. So, yeah. Anyways, What If season 1? 1 solid thumb up. Alrighty. That was that. I'm tired, and it's late as shit, so I'm going to bed. Have a good night, folks.